How y'all doing? For this book review, this will be my Halloween read for the year. Last year, I did two books on the same theme, werewolves. That is The Werewolf of Paris by Guy Andor and The House of the Wolf by Basil Copper. I tried reading this one on top of that for last year, but I couldn't get around to it. I've read it before, but I wanted to read it again before I review it, which is why I did this year. So for this year, this is also about werewolves. It is The Wolfman by Nicholas Piquero. Okay, not a unique title, but this is why it's important to memorize the author. So, let's take a look at it. The setting of the story takes place in a town called Evelyn. And it's a very decent sized town here. It has all the things a town in the middle America would have, both good and bad. And completely surrounded by woods and water, what have you. So it's very easy to picture this type of town when he describes it. Now in this town there is a nice little restaurant here with a 50s style motif, and in the back of there is a guy, cooking some pretty mean burgers, as he likes to proclaim. His name is Marlowe Higgins. He has long hair, he's got a mustache on it, he's often described as wearing shirts with rock bands onto it, blue jeans. Of course, not a people person. He's quite a jerk, to put it mildly. In fact, before he started working at a restaurant, he would he was drifting around from place to place, often getting drunk and starting bar fights, what have you. But he's been on the more or less straight and narrow, and that's why he's working at the restaurant. And see, his only friend in this town is a guy named Detective Danny Pierce. Now, he would come by, they would chat here, and Danny would give him some of the insights of the stuff he's been working on, certain murders around the area and what have you. And then, Marlowe would give his insights on what that is. Danny, it's kind of a weird relationship. It kind of makes you wonder how these two became friends, a troublemaker and a detective and all that. Especially, Danny Pierce. He's, the most talked about, liked guy in the town. High example of what, his people in force should be. He's got a wife who's pregnant, at the moment here, near the end of that, and so he has a pretty bright future. How did these two become friends? Well, one time, Marlowe started a bar fight. In the middle of a bar fight that he started, the cops came in. One time, when Danny Pierce was in the group, Marlowe saved, Danny during a fight, from getting seriously injured, and Danny did the same. So by helping each other out, a friendship did kind of come about. Sort of a Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday relationship here. I think that's what the author was meant to do. But why is Marlowe the way he is? Okay, you figure he was just a troublemaker, with no future on that. But he actually did have a future at a young age, but he acquired a curse. He's the werewolf in this story. So yeah, Marlowe being the werewolf means that every full moon, the beast will come out and will wreak havoc. Devastating as it was for a while, an agreement was made between the two in a sense. See, Marlowe was able to find out if he can find someone, like like a low end of life, a bad criminal or something like that. If he does enough research, he can find this person, the beast will come out and it will attack that person and no one else, or at least, an attempt. And it's been working for a while. Until one day, Marlowe found, thought that he found a really perfect subject for the beast to attack upon. See, there's been a murder that's happening that's connected to a serial killer called the Rose Killer. He's been killing women and leaving rose in their eyes and what have you. Okay, so he finds whatever research that he could on this Rose Killer, and next full moon, looking forward to it, the wolf takes over and comes out, and the next morning, Marlowe, of course, like typical werewolf stories here, he has no memories of what the wolf did. He wakes up in his own home, washes himself up of the damage that the wolf has done, and he comes to the restaurant, all happy that, okay, the job is done, and realizing that, from his co-worker, that his friend Danny Pierce was killed. His body was in such a, looked like it was ravaged by an animal. Something happened. The beast didn't do what was, what they kind of agreed upon. And so now Marlowe has to spend, the next few weeks, closing amount of time to the next full moon to find out why his friend was killed and not the Rose Killer, and what can he find of it. How did the Rose Killer evaded the wolf's scenting abilities and, and all that. So that's what he's got to do. And it's going to be a difficult rush here because Danny is already on thin ice in this town, just barely keeping it up with the people. What if there's evidence that point to him and find out his true nature? How did Danny get killed? Did he know more than what he did about Marlowe and the Rose Killer? Or was he just in a way by accident? And what will happen if a mistake was made and he is now considered the cause of all of the murders, and including with the Rose Killer and all that? So Marlowe has to spend the rest of the book trying to find out whatever he can about the Rose Killer, how he evaded the wolf, and how he can avenge his friend Danny, even though he was the one that sort of murdered it. But as far as he's concerned, since the killer avoided the wolf somehow, he was to blame for Danny getting away and getting killed. So that's the premise of the story. So yeah, the book here makes no bones about it, that what Marlowe has as a werewolf is a curse. It Beast Unleash, it is not like Twilight or anything. This will unleash havoc to anyone it can find. And before all this, the story takes place in the 90s, but he got his curse in the 70s. He got it in Vietnam. So before that, Marlowe had a very clean-cut life, had 2 supporting parents, had a beautiful girlfriend there, life was pretty good. And then he gets draft papers, he's, being sent off to Vietnam. He talks to his father about dodging and all that, and his father's like, okay, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to say your life's not going to be easy if you do this, because, when they find out you dodged the draft, you're not going to find a good supporting job here, and your girlfriend, even if when she became your wife, they're not going to treat her any well either, because she's married a draft dodger here. So just do what you can, and just go ahead and accept the draft, and hopefully you'll come back. So he does. He goes through all that, and while him and his squad there, I forget what they call it, but they're out in the middle of the jungle, they get ambushed by snipers in the trees, and as while they're pinned down, being killed off one by one, that's when Marlowe becomes a werewolf. And that's the thing, his father tried to convince him not just to do his duty as American. Him and his mother were hoping he would die there, because if he died before the father did, he would not receive the curse of the werewolf. And that's what we sort of find out through parts of the book. Well, what's happened here is that this is a passed down from father to son since Marlowe's great-grandfather. They were hoping he would die, but unfortunately, Marlowe's father, he got into an accident at work, and he died at the hospital. And when he died, the curse leaped out of him and then traveled across the world somehow and entered Marlowe right when he was pinned down by the snipers. He was the only one that survived his group. He has no memory of what happened here. He blacked out, all naked and covered, in mud and muck and blood. And based on his story and all that, they just sent him back home due to mental issues. Marlowe, not very happy about it. He comes home, finds out his father is dead, and blames him for it. His mother, while he visits her, he finds out that she sort of shoved his girlfriend away from her, like all of a sudden, what did you do that for? Look, I'm just going to leave. I'm going to take my girlfriend, I'm going to go off, we're going to start a life where I'm going to get married, and what have you. Now, as he goes off, a full moon happens, he comes back to his mother and tells her that she's dead. That's when the mother just, tells him the truth of what's happened to him, and that there's nothing he could do about it. Upset with his mother, he runs off. Tries to find what help that he can. Some people that with some mystic knowledge and all that can help with this, but they're all, they can't help with a darn. They're not who they say they are. He's stuck with this. Every full moon, the beast is unleashed. It kills whoever is in his way. Now, one of the certain, I guess you could say, advantages or effects of the lycanthropy, from Marlowe, other than the beast coming out here, is that when whoever the beast kills, Marlowe would have the memories of that victim, as he wakes up. And so he'll have some memories, he may a little bit of habits of the person that was killed, so forth. Like one guy he killed would make a habit driving around recklessly in circles in the middle of the night. And there were times in the book he started doing that because it just felt right at the time. It's a habit he picked up from that. It's even given him an ability to read, speak, and understand languages, a few of those here and there. But it also could be very painful here because his friend Danny Pierce, he's gaining his memories and all that, and he gets memories of of his interaction with his wife, so that makes him harder to do investigations. But hopefully that can come in handy here and there. But every once in a while, at random, the beast may give him memories at certain moments of the beast's perspective of what happened, and hopefully one of those can make Danny piece things together of what the Rose Killer is, how he evaded him, and hopefully he can find a way to stop him. So around 286 pages here. This book is a very nice read here, very breezy and everything. Reading one of the endorsements on this by Jack Ketchum, consider Lon Chaney Jr. meets the Incredible Hulk, as imagined by Charles Bukowski. The idea of this was the start of a series where Marlowe goes from town to town, with this like lycanthropy curse. He would come across other bad guys him to face, and maybe even some other supernatural creatures like vampires and alchemists and all that. This was described to him by the introduction to this by, I believe, an editor who was looking into his stories here. And think of Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files, but more horror-based than fantasy. It could have been great. Unfortunately, we're not going to get it. See, Nicholas Piccaro, while starting off, while he was trying to be a writer, he was also a volunteer police officer for the auxiliary NYPD. And then in 2007, he was killed in line of duty. So all we got is this book, written published posthumously. So there is that. And I've looked around on eBay, quick search on eBay, and a quick Google search. You could quickly get this book for as little as about $6 to $7, maybe up to $12 or $20. Now, there's a couple of places that sell it for $40 and $100. I don't know where they do this, but get it while you can, while the demand is still low. But with that said, if you like werewolves, you like horror, a little bit of mystery and all that, check this out. Now, I say, with mystery, I'm not a heavy mystery reader. I've only read a handful, so if you read mysteries a lot, you can probably figure out who the killer is and all that. But don't let that spoil, your fun there. I hope you can still find enjoyment in that. So with that said, The Wolfman by Nicholas Piccaro. Get what you can while the demand is still low. Thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.